Mr. Fox and the three remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew what they were going to have was a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than Boggs' chickens they were going to eat made them churgle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realise that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them dinner without knowing it. "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. "It's not much further." All of a sudden, a deep voice above their heads said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped. They looked up quickly, and they saw, peeking through a small hole in the roof of the tunnel, a long, black, pointed, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. "My goodness me! I'm glad I found someone at last. I've been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights. I haven't had the foggiest idea where I am." Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped down after him. "Haven't you heard exactly what's happening on the hill?" Badger said, excited. "It's chaos. Half the wood's disappeared, and there are these men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We're all starving to death." "Who's we?" said Mr. Fox. "All us diggers. That's you, me, Mole, Rabbit, our wives, children, even Weasel, who can usually sneak out the tightest spots, is now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and his 6 kids. What are we going to do, Foxy? I think we're finished." Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back, sharing a secret. "My dear old Badger," he said, "this mess you're in is my fault." "Yeah, I know it's your fault," said Badger furiously, "and the farmers are not going to give up until they've got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill." Badger sat down and put a paw around his son. "We're done for," he said. "My poor wife up there is so weak she can't even dig another yard." "Nor mine," said Mr. Fox, "and yet this very moment she's preparing me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens." "Stop," cried Badger. "Don't tease me, I can't stand it." "It's true," said the small foxes. "Dad's not teasing, we've got chickens galore." "And because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it, you and Mole and Rabbit and Weasel and all your wives and children. There'll be plenty to go round, I assure you." "You mean it?" cried Badger. "You really mean it?" Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, "Do you know where we've just been?" "Where?" "Right inside Boggs's chicken house number 1. "No." "Yes, and that's nothing to where we're going right now. You just come up at the right moment, my dear Badger, and you can help us dig. And meanwhile, your son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news." Mr. Fox turned to the small badger and said, "Tell them that we're invited to Fox's feast. Then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back till you find my home." "Yes, Mr. Fox," said the small badger. "Yes, sir, right away." "Oh, thank you, sir." And he scrambled quickly back through the hole in the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. Bunce's giant storehouse. "My dear Foxy," cried Badger, "what in the world has happened to your tail?" "No, don't talk about it, please," said Mr. Fox. "It's a painful subject." They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now. He was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. "Now, if I'm not mistaken, my dear Badger," he said, "we are underneath the farm which belongs to the nasty little pot-bellied dwarf, Bunce. We are, in fact, directly underneath the most interesting part of the farm." "Ducks and geese!" cried the small foxes, licking their lips. "Tender, juicy ducks and big fat geese." "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But how in the world can you know where we are?" said Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. "Look," he said, "I know my way round these farms blindfold. For me, it's just as easy below ground as it is above." He reached up high and pushed up one wooden floorboard, then another. He poked his head up through the gap. "Yes," he shouted, jumping up into the room above, "I've done it again. I hit it smack on the nose, right in the bullseye. Come and have a look." Quickly, Badger and the 3 small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed they couldn't speak. And for now they saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. "This, my dear Badger," proclaimed Mr. Fox, "is Bunce's mighty storehouse, and his finest stuff is stored in there, and he sends it off to market." Against all 4 walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards piled high on shelves reaching from floor to ceiling were thousands upon thousands of the finest, fattest geese, duck, plucked, ready for roasting. And up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon. Feast your eyes on that, cried Mr Fox, dancing up and down. What do you think of it, eh? Pretty good grub. Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, the 3 hungry small foxes and the ravenous hungry badger sprang forward to grab the luscious food. Stop, ordered Mr Fox. This is my party, so I shall do the choosing. The others fell back, licking their chops. Mr Fox began prowling round the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. A thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw and hung suspended in mid-air, then snapped. We mustn't overdo it, he said. Mustn't give the game away. Mustn't let them know we've been up to. It must be neat and tidy. Just take a few of the choicest morsels. Now, to start with, we'll have 4 plump young ducks. He took them off the shelf. Oh, how lovely and fat they are. No wonder Bunce gets a special price for them at market. All right, Badger, lend me a hand and get them down. Your children can help as well. Here we go. Goodness me. Look how your mouths are watering. And now, I think we'd better have a few geese. 3 will be quite enough. We'll take the biggest. Oh my, you'll never see a finer geese than these in the king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. Now, what about a couple of nice smoked hams? Oh, I adore smoked ham, don't you, Badger? Pass me up a step ladder if you wouldn't mind. Mr Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. Do you like bacon, Badger? Oh, I'm mad about bacon, cried Badger, dancing with excitement. Let's have a side of bacon, that big one up there. And carrots, Dad, said the smallest of the 3 foxes. You mustn't forget the carrots. Don't be a twerp, said Mr Fox. You know we don't eat things like that. It's not us for Dad, it's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables. Oh my goodness, you're right, cried Mr Fox. What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots. Soon all this lovely loot was lying in a nice heap upon the floor. The small foxes crouched close, their noses twitching, their eyes shining like stars. And now, said Mr Fox, we shall borrow from our friend Bunce 2 more of the useful pushcarts over in the corner. He and Badger fetched the pushcarts, and the geese and the ducks and the ham and the bacon were loaded into them. Quickly the pushcarts were loaded through the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them back through the tunnel. Mr Fox again pulled the floorboard very carefully into place so no one could see they had been moved. My darlings, he said, pointing to 2 of the 3 small foxes, take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we're having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the rabbits and the weasels. And tell her it'll be a truly great feast. And tell her the rest of us will be home soon after we've done one more little job. Yes, Dad, right away, Dad, they answered. And they grabbed a trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel.